Valentina Cienfuegos opened her grandmother's coffee tin on a Tuesday in October with hands that still trembled from the journey, and the smell that rose from inside stopped her cold in the middle of the farmhouse kitchen. This is the story of a young woman who came to inherit what seemed like almost nothing, and found that almost nothing was exactly enough to change everything. Welcome. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and comment from which part of Mexico or wherever you're watching us. There are inheritances that are received with joy, and then there is a third kind that no one mentions. The inheritance one receives without yet knowing what one is receiving. Valentina was 23 years old. She had just finished 2 years of working in a tortilla shop in Jalapa to pay off the debt her mother had left when she died. And the only thing she knew about her grandmother Eulalia's farm was that it was in the hills of Coatec, that it had coffee fields and 3 cows and a wooden house that smelled of dampness and stopped time, and that her uncles, Ruperto and Clemencia, also Eulalia's children, had spent 2 years telling her it was a problem, not an asset, and that the sensible thing was to sell it before the land went further into debt than it already was. Valentina hadn't seen the farm since she was 9 years old. What she remembered of her grandmother was specifically this: the smell of coffee. Not the everyday coffee, the kind made quickly and drunk standing up. The other coffee, the one Eulalia prepared on Sundays through a process that began the night before, and that the old woman never fully explained because she said hands learn on their own if the heart already knows. That's why when Valentina opened the tin and that smell came out, dark roasted, with something of chocolate and something of wet earth, and something more that had no name but was unmistakably Eulalia's, she stood still for a long moment. Then she closed the tin, set it on the table, and began to really look at the kitchen. She had arrived that morning on the first bus from Jalapa with a backpack and the uncertainty of someone going to see something that could change what they decide. Her uncles hadn't come. Ruperto had sent a message through the farm's neighbor to let her in, and Clemencia had called the day before to tell her, in that voice she used for things already decided, that there was a buyer interested from Coatec and that the price was reasonable, and that Valentina had to understand that a coffee farm without anyone to work it was not a gift, but a burden. Valentina had listened in silence and said she was going to see. The farm was what her uncles said, and also what her uncles didn't see. Yes, the house needed a new roof on the right wing. The coffee processing shed had a rusted depulper. The coffee fields on the north side were neglected, and the 3 cows, Esperanza, Consuelo, and Milagros, names clearly given by no man, were thin with that specific thinness of animals lacking attention, not food. But the coffee fields on the south side were good. Better than good. They were loaded with red cherries that no one had picked yet because no one had come to pick them. And in the air of Coatepec, there was that particular humidity that makes the coffee from that area taste the way it does and not like any other. The land was good. Valentina didn't yet understand coffee, but she understood work, and good land is recognized the same way as good work, by what it produces even when no one is watching. That first afternoon, while she was going through the house room by room, she found the notebook. It was in the last drawer of her grandmother's wardrobe, beneath a folded blouse that still smelled of her, of lavender soap and coffee, which was Eulalia's scent in all its versions, wrapped in a clean cloth and tied with a wine-colored ribbon that had faded with time. It was a thick notebook with black covers, its pages filled with her grandmother's tight, even handwriting. The same handwriting Valentina recognized instantly because it was the same as the letters Eulalia used to send her when she was a child, and which she still kept in a box in Jalapa. They weren't just coffee recipes. They were complete processes, with times and temperatures and proportions written with the precision of someone who has repeated something thousands of times and wants to make sure no one does it wrong after she's gone. Dry roasting versus honey roasting, the exact blend of varieties for Sunday's coffee. Old Typica with Garnica, in a proportion Eulalia had refined over 30 years. The resting time after roasting, the water temperature, the order in which things were added when there were spices. And at the end of the notebook, taped with packing tape, now yellowed with age, a document folded in 4. Valentina carefully unstuck it. It was a certificate from the Mexican Institute of Industrial Property, dated 8 years earlier, in the name of Eulalia Cienfuegos Vargas, registering a brand, Café de la Sierra Eulalia, with the artisanal roasting process described in the notebook as a protected method. Eulalia had registered her coffee. Valentina read the document twice. Then she looked at the coffee tin sealed with red wax that still sat on the kitchen table, with the label written by hand on the lid. For whoever comes to stay. But Valentina didn't yet know that her grandmother had done something more than register a brand. What none of her uncles knew was that Eulalia, 3 years before dying, had begun selling that coffee directly to a specialty shop in Mexico City through an acquaintance, and that this commercial relationship slept in an email that the acquaintance, a woman named Beatriz from Coyoacán, was still waiting for someone in the family to take up. Valentina found it written on the last page of the notebook, with a date and contact number and a note from her grandmother beneath it. Beatrice is waiting for news. The coffee I sent her arrived well. She says her customers ask for more. When I'm no longer here, whoever inherits the notebook, let them call. Valentina called the next day. Beatrice answered on the second ring as if she had been waiting. The uncles arrived on Saturday. Ruperto came with the buyer, a man from Jalapa who bought farms to subdivide them into vacation lots, and Clemencia came with the certainty of someone who believes the decision is already made. They found Valentina on the porch with a cup of coffee in her hand, and the neighbors from the farm next door seated in the front chairs, Don Aurelio and Doña Petra Meneses, a couple in their 70s who had been Eulalia's closest fellow coffee growers for decades and who had appeared that morning without Valentina calling them, because in the farms of Coatec people know when someone needs to be there. Ruperto was direct. I came so we can sign, Valentina. Mr. Contreras has the offer ready. I'm not selling, said Valentina. Clemencia used the same tone as always. Valentina, you're a girl alone. You know nothing about coffee. This farm needs investment and time and knowledge that the knowledge is in grandmother's notebook, said Valentina. And the time I have. Ruperto changed his tone. This isn't only yours. We're also mother's children. The will says the farm is mine, said Valentina, and the notebook says for whoever comes to stay. I came, and I'm staying. Don Aurelio, who hadn't said anything until that moment, served himself more coffee from the pitcher with the calm of someone who has no rush of any kind, and commented quietly, as if speaking of the weather. Eulalia's coffee has a registered trademark. That's worth more than the land if it's worked well. I know because I saw her build it. The buyer looked at Ruperto. Ruperto looked at Clemencia. Clemencia looked at Valentina with that expression people have when they understand they've lost but aren't yet ready to say so. You're going to regret this, said Clemencia at last. Maybe, said Valentina, but it's my regret. They left. Mr. Contreras left with them without having said much, which is what intelligent buyers do when they understand there's no deal. Doña Petra, when she saw them moving away down the farm path, served the last cups from the pitcher and said, Your grandmother would have done exactly the same thing as you. What followed was work, which is always what follows when one decides to stay. Don Aurelio taught Valentina to read the cherry, when it's ready, when it's overripe, when one must wait. He lent her his son for the harvest of that first cycle, because alone she wouldn't have managed with the southern coffee fields that were loaded. Doña Petra taught her to operate the depulper when Valentina found the parts rusted and didn't know where to begin, and between the two of them they got it working in 3 afternoons of work and oil and patience. Valentina learned the roasting from the notebook, trial by trial, burning the first 4 kilos, until her hands began to understand what Eulalia's handwriting meant by even mahogany color and scent of nuts before the smoke. The 5th kilo came out well, the 6th, better. She called Beatrice in Mexico City with the first batch ready, 3 kilos of Café de la Sierra Eulalia in the blend from the notebook roasted as the instructions said, sealed in bags with the label Valentina had drawn herself copying her grandmother's handwriting. Beatrice called 4 days after receiving the package. It's the same, she said, and in that word there was something Valentina took a moment to decipher. It wasn't surprise. It was relief. The 3 cows recovered their flesh in the same time the coffee fields took to give their second harvest, slowly, steadily, without grand gestures. Esperanza was the first, then Consuelo, then Milagros, who was the oldest and most stubborn, and the one who gave Valentina the most work in the first months. but who ended up being the one who gave the most milk when she found her rhythm. At sunset, when the three came back alone along the dirt path from the pasture to the corral, Valentina watched them arrive from the porch with the cup of coffee in her hands and the black-covered notebook open on the table inside, always open, because she kept studying it every night the way one studies something one knows one will need for a lifetime. The tin sealed with red wax lived on the kitchen sideboard. Valentina had not opened it again. She had placed it there the way one places something one wants to see every day, so as not to forget where what one is doing comes from. Don Aurelio asked her one afternoon why she didn't use it. "Because it's the last one she made," said Valentina. "When I make one just as good, I'll open it." Don Aurelio nodded. "You won't take long," he said. "Sometimes this is how the most important things arrive. Not at the moment one believes one is ready, but at the moment one believes one has nothing." Valentina Cienfuegos arrived at a coffee farm with a backpack and the uncertainty of those who don't yet know what they are receiving. And she found in the last drawer of her grandmother's wardrobe something that had no sale price, the knowledge of someone who loved a thing so much that she wanted to make sure it would last longer than she would. Have you ever had to let go of something you loved in order to receive what you needed? If this story touched something in your heart, leave your comment below. Tell me from what part of Mexico or wherever you're watching. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single story. And share it with someone who is doubting between staying or leaving, because sometimes the answer is already in the last drawer of the wardrobe, waiting for someone to come and open it. Until the next story. And they say in the hills of Coatec that when the morning mist comes down over Valentina Cienfuegos' farm, and the smell of roasted coffee rises along the path to the main road, the people of that area know without needing to ask that there is someone there who learned from her grandmother the hardest thing, not the coffee process, but the patience to stay until understanding it.